Hello, my name is Roberta Hadley. I am with the Center for Home Ownership and Economic Development. Today, I am joined by Melanie McIntyre. Melanie is with the Armstrong Center for Hope. If you've joined us before, then you know that the Center for Home Ownership and Economic Development and the Center for Hope are partnering to implement a peer and family support services project. So we look forward to talking more about that today. Melanie, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Ms. Roberta. How are you?
Well, thanks so much for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure.
So before we get down to what we are going to talk about today, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your role with the center,
Sure.
and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, I'm Melanie McIntyre. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor associate with the Armstrong Center for Hope. I spend the biggest bulk of my time doing psychotherapy with children and adolescents, teenagers, and young adults. I work with children who have all sorts of issues such as ADHD, anxiety, depression, some suicidality, childhood trauma. I also do psychological evaluations.
So you're a pretty busy person, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's never a dull moment.
I hear you. Well, we are going to spend time today focusing on building homework skills. So we've asked some folks to submit some questions that they have in order to provide some support. And so I'm going to pull a few of them and ask you to respond to them.
Sure. Sounds
Okay.
good.
So Melanie, we are here to focus on homework skills. So can you start us off by talking a little bit about some of the trends or overarching themes that you're seeing when it comes to homework skills in the students that you work with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will be transparent. Most of the homework concerns that are brought to me are typically around children with ADHD or specific learning disorders, or even some intellectual disabilities. But across the board, there is this big overarching notion that children just don't want to do homework. From a teacher's perspective, they're not turning it in, they're not submitting the work. And from the parent's perspective, is they're busy, but they're on their children. They think their children have done the homework, or even the children say, we've done the homework, but it doesn't get submitted. So I just wanted to bring some strategies and tips that may help the parents with compliance at home, but also getting the homework submitted, and possibly even just informing the parents of why some of these issues occur based on the child's development and things like
Nice. I definitely, even before COVID, uh, saw a trend where students just wouldn't turn in homework. And I couldn't quite understand that I would watch them take the hours of time that it would take to actually do the homework, but then they would make the decision to not turn it in. So I'm definitely interested in hearing your feedback on how we can kind of turn that tide a bit. So um okay, so Melanie, talk to us a little bit about what we as parents need to be mindful of as we work to support our students. You know, we want them to be successful, we want to be as involved as we need to be, or, you know, give them as much space as they need. So talk to us a little bit about what we can do.
that. All right. So first of all, as parents, I think it's really important to keep in mind expectations, right? So just think for a moment, when you're leaving work and you're transitioning from work to home, sometimes you need a moment to decompress from work and transition into mommy mode. Well, children need that too. So they've been in school, they've been in this structured environment all day where most likely they've had to sit the majority of the day. They've had to focus the majority of the day. What I'm finding is that a lot of parents want the children to come home, get the homework done. We've got to get bath, we've got to get dinner, we got to get bed on time, and they just want them to jump right in. Well, the same way adults need to decompress, children do as well. And so I think managing the expectations of the parents is one of the things that's going to keep the peace in the household. It's going to keep blood pressure from rising, and also just keep everybody calm and functioning in a more efficient way. So I think that's the first thing. And then I think it's also important for parents to kind of look at homework. If you look in school like a sport, so where school and the tests and exams, that's game day, right? But the homework is the practice. So we also have to keep in mind the importance of homework. So that's the opportunity for the children to practice the skills that they learn in school, the concepts that they learn in school, so that they can solidify the information. So if they're just going to school and they're just engaged in that topic at school, they don't get the practice that they need to make those concepts stick. So what I like to tell parents is for optimal success in the classroom and in the academic environment, it's important for the children to develop good homework skills early on. So having a set time for homework, a set space for homework, but also knowing that they are going to need breaks. And then they can come back to it. So for this segment, I would really like to share with you all opportunities for helpful tips and strategies that are particularly around homework success and compliance.
Awesome. I love that analogy for sure. I think that'll be super helpful for parents to be able to kind of see how those things parallel. So thanks for that for sure. So let's transition.
Okay.
We have a few questions that have come in from parents that are looking
Nice.
for specific answers on how they can support their students. So let's see here. Let's see, here's our first question here. To help my child keep his grades up, I stay on him about his homework. As soon as we get home, he knows he has to do homework before going outside, watching TV, playing video games. He knows this is a routine, but he still has a tantrum every day. What can I do to reduce the conflict and lower both of our stress levels? I'm sure that's very common.
That probably is one of the biggest questions that I get from parents. And it's interesting because historically that has been a routine, homework first, then play. But look, from a developmental approach, children, first of all, parents have to realize that children are still learning when they're playing. That is actually how they learn. So they get curious about something, then they explore the thing, and then they learn something from it. And so that is innate, that is natural in them. So when you try to fight against that, you're fighting against innate drives. And so I think that's important, but I also think it's important for parents to keep in mind that, again, you are at work all day. So sometimes when you get off work, you just need a moment before you jump into the next responsibility. Your children need that same break. So one of the biggest things that comes with managing expectations and understanding where your child is developmentally is understanding that need for some gross motor stimulation. That means basically play. I got to get that energy out. If you try to fight against that, you're going to spend that whole homework hour saying, sit down, pay attention, do this. So it is just so much easier to just try to allow for 30 minutes to an hour of just free play. And that could look like anything, soccer, dance, rock climbing, skating, biking, just going to the park and playing around a little bit, going on the slide, something to get that energy out. And what that does is helps the child manage their own energy and attention, but it also helps reduce the level of frustration when it comes time to sit down and actually do the homework. And so I think it's also beneficial because a lot of parents say, well, they seem to have attention problems. They stare off into space. Their brain needs that transition. And sometimes, just like if you're at work and you get up and go to get a cup of coffee and come back, it kind of resets your brain. The same thing happens with children. So allowing that little bit of time, 30 minutes to an hour, just in that transition from school to homework, will make a huge difference in gaining compliance from the child.
I love that. And I think with, when budget cuts happen in school districts, often it's the arts and recess, things like that go away first. So you have some students that aren't even getting that in school. So
Right.
being able to get that when they get home, I can imagine that making a huge difference in the success of getting compliance with getting homework done. So I love that.
And I also think that it helps the children manage their own expectations when there is a specific place and time set for homework. So once you've gotten through the play mode and you've gotten some of that energy out, if the child already knows I have to go sit in this specific place and do my work, it's almost like it is natural for them. They know what's coming next, and you get less pushback that way. So you can also, I know I mentioned managing parent expectations, but you can also manage the child's expectation by having them know what comes next. And a good way to do that is the consistency in the place and time for the homework.
So you mentioned working with students with ADHD. So is that the same for that type of student, or are you adding extra breaks for that type of student, or how are you adjusting for a student that's also having to manage ADHD?
Absolutely. That consistency is essential for children with learning disabilities, for children with learning disorders, attentional disorders. They really need structure. And so after allowing for the release of energy and excess energy, them knowing that this is what comes next is essential for them. It's just the way that their brain works. They need that structure. Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to our second question here. Let's see here. Okay, we have one here. Despite helping my child at home, the teacher still reports that my child is struggling. What can I do to help?
Great question. That is a really good question. And I know parents get super frustrated, especially when they feel that they're doing all that they can do and they don't know what else to do. I would say the first thing is open communication with the teacher. Having a good rapport with the teacher, whether you agree with their methods or not, just being able to communicate with them makes all the difference. And so one of the first questions I encourage parents to ask is be specific. When they come to me and they say, my child is having issues in school, okay, well, what specifically is the issue? Is it that the child can't sit still? Is it that the child can't read? Is it that the child excels in reading and writing but can't do well in math? What specifically is the deficit that the teacher is concerned about? And having that open communication with the teacher can help the parent hone in on whatever the challenges are and shift their focus to those specific challenges. It's kind of difficult when you look at things in a broad way or broad concept and knowing how to help the child. If you just know they're struggling academically but don't know where, it's pretty hard to help them hone in on the things that they find most challenging. So first and foremost, just open communication. Also, I think some parents are unaware or don't take advantages of the resources that they have around them. There are a lot of community centers, there are a lot of colleges that partner with the public schools to provide free tutoring. And I know from, for example, UNC Chapel Hill, they have students who go to the schools to provide free tutoring. And so if it's an area of math, for example, that the child shows some weaknesses, then all the parent would need to do is contact the school and ask about free tutoring, especially if finances is a concern for the parent. Some parents may say, well, I'm already checked the check. I don't have money to go out and hire a tutor. We have so many good community programs that offer those services at no charge. So tap into those resources. Also ask the schools what programs are available to help my child. Is my child in need of an IEP or a 504? Does my child need testing? What's available so that the parent has access to all resources available to them? So that's the other part. I also encourage parents to offer praise not only to their children for what they can do, but also to the teacher. It's important for the child to see that there's a positive parent-teacher relationship, and that children are really creative. That takes away that ability to tell the teacher one thing and then tell the parent something different. It makes things more cohesive. So now we have the child, the parent, and the teacher working together. So that's a better opportunity for the child to be successful. The other thing is a lot of times when children struggle with things, they internalize their struggle. They recognize I'm not reading like the rest of my peers. They may not say it or articulate it, but a lot of times when it's for behavior problems, for example, one of the biggest things with behavior problems is that the child has given up. And so you want to give positive praise and reinforcements to children. A lot of times old school parents will say, well, that's what you're supposed to do. And that's true. You should, make good grades. You should do those things. But there's nothing wrong with giving a little bit of encouragement through positive praise. And that what that does is keeps the child from internalizing the problems that they're having and the challenges that they're having, and makes them work a little bit harder to try to get it. And it makes them more likely to come to mom or come to dad and say, hey, I can't do this homework. I don't know what I'm doing, as opposed to just shutting down completely. So I think positive reinforcement is a huge way to help your child who's having some learning challenges in the school, so that they don't fall into behavior problems and have some emotional problems with that. I also think repetition, repetition, repetition. The more you do things, the more it stores into the memory, the more you have a handle on what you're doing and understanding of what you're doing. And then enthusiasm for learning and for school. And some people may say, well, how does that help my child academically? Well, think about it. If you are in a household where everybody is really into music, your child typically learns to love music. If you're in a household where everybody loves sports, your child typically learns to love sports. Same thing with academics. If you show no interest in your child's academics, what makes you think they're going to be interested? So showing some enthusiasm for what they're doing, taking a moment, as busy as we are, just taking a moment and sitting with them. What you learned today? What you do in school today? And so that's a really big part of it. Nurture and encourage their excitement for learning. Get creative, find ways to make learning fun. If they say, well, we did a science experiment today, have them explain it to you and then come up with your own experiment. And making them excited about it kind of will help give them the oomph and the push that they need to work a little bit harder on the things that they have challenges with. And then when you do come across things that are challenging for them, maybe it's reading or math, then encourage them, support them, validate their feelings. I know this is really tough for you. Mom had trouble with math too. Let's see what we can do to make this a little bit easier. And I think that'll make a huge difference in how the children approach their issues within the classroom. And the teachers will love you for that too.
You're right. I love all of those strategies, and hopefully there's at least one piece of that someone that may be challenged with time and capacity, maybe hopefully there's at least one of those strategies that someone can incorporate. They're great. Thank you so much. I'll ask you one more question related to that. How do you talk to parents about ignoring, I guess, if I can say it that way, the stigma that comes with 504 and IEP? How do you encourage parents to push that aside for the benefit of their student excelling, if that's, what can actually be a difference maker for them?
Great question. I approach that the same way I approach medication. A lot of parents don't like medication. A lot of parents don't like the label that comes with having an IEP or a 504, but in some cases it's absolutely necessary. I don't want to necessarily have to go to the doctor and hear that I have high blood pressure, right? I want to do everything that I can in my power to fix it. That means eating right, drinking water, exercising. However, in some instances, that's not enough. In some instances, I have to take medication. Same thing with diabetes. Some people can manage their diabetes with a healthy diet and exercise. Other people just need insulin despite their efforts. The same holds true for an IEP and a 504. Why would you watch your child struggle if it's not necessary? And we have to get away from being afraid of labels. Labels just gives us something to work with. If we don't have a label, we don't have a name for something, it's hard to treat it. It's hard to provide resources and accommodations for something that we haven't identified. And so if your child is struggling in an area, why would you want them to continue to struggle when there are resources out there available to help their specific needs? And so that's what I would say to a parent who's concerned about that. What's more important, the stigma or your child getting the help and resources that they need? And I'll throw one more thing and one more little nugget in there. I do a lot of psychological evaluations on college students. And college students, particularly in this area, tend to be pretty smart. I do a lot of evaluations with Duke students and UNC students, NC State, Wake Forest. And those are pretty rigorous programs. And the first thing that they say to me in the initial interview is, I know I'm smart. I don't know why I'm struggling. I know I can do this. I know I'm a smart person. Why am I not successful as a college student? And it's because they've had issues from early on, and they've been encouraged to push through. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, the struggles could have been minimized had these things been identified early on. Now they're at the college level, PhD level. I've even seen medical students who are just getting diagnosed because of fear of stigma and fear of being labeled. And they get the help they need. They come in for testing. They get a diagnosis, and they get the help that they need. And then they come back and they're like, I should have done this so much longer ago. I could have been so much further along than where I am. And so I like to remind parents of that. Don't hold them back because you're afraid of a label. That just gives us something to work with.
I love that. And it's so unfortunate that so many folks wait and hear that information so late. But I think that we are trending towards being having those topics less stigmatized. So hopefully more and more
Absolutely.
people are getting the support they need earlier. So thank you so much for that.
You're
We've got
very
one
welcome.
more
Yes.
parent question for you.
Okay, sure.
Okay, let's see here. How can I help my child learn study skills as well as process and retain new information?
Great question. Great question. Again, I think a lot of it goes back to repetition. Repetition, reinforcing what the teacher has already shared at school or the educator, being enthusiastic about their work. When a child learns something new, especially younger children, they tend to be so excited about it. Share that enthusiasm with them. Um, get creative with them, but also encourage your children to show you what they know in different ways, not just writing or not just doing math problems, but using different things around the house to show you the concepts that they've learned. So if they can understand something in multiple ways, it tends to stick a little bit better. There's also some strategies that I recommend, like chunking and scaffolding and mnemonics. So, for example, chunking, that's when you take little pieces of information that are associated with each other and put them together so that you can understand one big concept. A lot of adults use this method when we're trying to remember things, when we got 10,000 things on our mind. So, for instance, a grocery list. If we walk off and forget the grocery list, how can we remember what we need from the grocery store without having to go all the way back home? Well, we chunk the information. What do I need in dairy? What kind of condiments do I need? What kind of um, health and beauty products do I need? So that's one way to help children is retain information as well, making concepts stick, little small individual tidbits of information and bringing them together to make one big concept. Another strategy that's really helpful in this use in the school system is scaffolding. And so basically, that's where in the beginning, you are really hands on with your child. The teacher is really hands on with your child until you start to see them progress in their knowledge of that specific concept or information. And as their ability to understand and process the information gets bigger, you take your hands off. And so it's a kind of a slowly guided approach to leading them into their own independence with that specific topic. So they're really guided with it at first, and then eventually they're doing those things by themselves. And then finally, one thing I would recommend is mnemonics. Mnemonics is a great tool. We use it all the time and don't even realize it. So for parents who are like, what is that? In my generation, one of the most famous ones was I before E except after C. So, you have P's and things like that. And like, which one comes first? I before E except after C. That's a mnemonic. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Putting your ABCs to music or putting any concept to a song can help you retain that information. Acoustics. I have a hard time pronouncing it. Please forgive me. But those are things where you use the first letter of a concept and you put it with something else that begins with that letter. So, for example, in math skills, when you're learning order of operations, we used to use please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, that sort of thing. So putting those things together with different concepts can also help your child retain the information. So I could also just give you just a brief recap, of things that we do here at the center to help children with homework and things I've shared with parents. So one thing is offering multiple ways to demonstrate your knowledge, as I mentioned, using those mnemonics, chunking information. You could also use color coding for younger children. Red is for adding, blue is for subtracting. Parent-teacher communication being essential. And then most importantly, be patient. It is a process. And so we're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for the child to progress.
So Melanie, thank you so much for all of those tips and strategies. We certainly know that there are parents across the board that can benefit from this information. As we referenced earlier, our two centers are partnering to implement a peer and family support services project, particularly targeting the IDD community. So we certainly hope those families as well take advantage of this information. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
In closing, how do we get in touch with you? How do we contact the center?
Absolutely. You can reach us at the Armstrong Center for Hope. We have an office in Durham and an office in Raleigh. And our phone number is 919-418-1718. And you can also reach us at our website, thearmstrongcenterforhope.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.